Okay, I think we're going to get started here. So, if you're new to the university, welcome. Happy to share a workshop with you. And if you're returning, welcome back. This video is going to be creating engaging videos. So my name's John Sellers. I'm an instructional media specialist here, and I work over in the TLS department on the third floor of JP2 at the Fort Wayne campus. So yeah, this workshop, at least for this first one, it's going to be a general overview of kind of some educational theory as it deals with videography, graphic design, pretty much anything multimedia. And then I'll also give you some practical tips as well. Okay, so let's get going in here. Okay, so why is video an important learning tool? Education is always changing fast right now. I think the biggest thing that education and educators are dealing with is the surgence in AI right now, and multimedia comes along with that as well. But you know, when you're thinking of making a video, any kind of instructional media, whether that be audio or video or both, or some kind of graphic design or motion graphics, what do you observe, I guess, is the question. So I want to go over 3 innovative concepts that can help keep students engaged, something to think about before creating these videos. The first thing I want to mention is cognitive load. So cognitive load is the amount of information a student can hold at one time. We want students to remember what we teach and what they're getting educated in, obviously, but when it comes to multimedia, this happens all the time. Students get overloaded very quickly with the amount of information that can be thrown at them, whether that be not talking at the speed of conversation, so the amount of information it would take to get through in a speaking lecture. In a video, if you edit that down, it may look a lot quicker in succession. And sometimes students, it starts to become white noise a lot faster for them. It can just become overwhelming. So something to remember is that memory has 2 primary channels for processing. This is pretty straightforward, but let's see here. Second. My notes don't want to come up. The first one, though, is visual, and the second one is auditory senses. So though both channels have limited capacity, their channels can help integrate new information into the existing cognitive structure of the student. So to put that in other words, when we incorporate both forms of learning simultaneously, we're able to engage the students more fully. So bringing video and audio together, kind of like in this perfect marriage for students. But this method of education also obviously runs into that mode of cognitive load where it becomes overwhelming too quickly. And even if both channels have a limited capacity, having multimedia incorporated into your coursework can tap into long-term memory, just the same as being on ground and in class would. We can kind of replicate that experience and even find ways to enhance it as we'll learn. It's just about striking the right balance. The second concept I want to talk about is student engagement. This is, teaching faculty understand this is probably the most difficult aspect of teaching and having courses with students is you want to get them involved, but sometimes they just don't want to be all that involved. And with the world changing so fast, we got to find ways to adapt dramatically to the shifting landscape, whether that be through AI or new and improved forms of learning, even down to how students are consuming information, whether that be through social media or Reddit or whatever else students are into these days. We want to find ways in some way to stay true to our material, but also adapt to the culture as well. So a simple model here, let's see. So if students don't watch the videos you assign, they won't be able to learn from them. That's pretty simple in theory, but it's just a fact. And my advice to that would be, one, keep your videos fairly short to help combat that fatigue of cognitive load. Try and keep it conversational. Make it sound like you're talking to them through the camera, not just kind of reciting something off of a sheet of paper. And there are different methods on how you can do that that we'll talk about, and I can talk about it with anyone that's interested in that more some other time as well. But then three, also just remember your audience. Just remember who you're talking to, and that while we get older and older as teaching faculty, the students get younger and younger, it feels like sometimes. And yeah, especially with AI and everything else, since really the age of the internet, things have just been going fast forward. So trying our best to keep up. Sometimes, one person can't do all that by themselves. So it requires a lot of collaboration. It requires a team where some people, can specialize in what they do. Like for instance, for me, if a teaching faculty member comes to me, my job is to help you guys find professionalism in video and audio, and how do we make this the most engaging it can be for the student based on the current social climate. So let me go through my notes here. There's multiple forms of videos that can get developed and integrated into courses. Obviously, some forms of videos are going to be longer than others. And, when I say to generally keep the video short, I mostly mean that students these days prefer when informational videos tend to get right to the point. So that means that things could potentially be cut, not necessarily the meat of your video or the information that you're trying to convey to the students, but I'm mostly talking about are there ways to consolidate an introduction? Maybe 10 minutes or less. When it starts getting more than that, where they haven't even gotten into the video yet, that can get kind of cumbersome for a student. And then before you know it, they're scrolling through the timeline trying to see if they can skip ahead a little bit. And then, also things like exaggerated title sequences. So anything over 5 to 10 seconds, if you're just getting into motion graphics for the first time, or you want a title on the front of your video. Some people tend to get a little overzealous with that kind of stuff, and they got all these moving images going by, and before you know, you have like a 14-point title to your video. And then also on the opposite side of that spectrum, slow cut editing can often be a drawback as well. So if your video tends to, the content itself doesn't take long to portray, but you take long pauses in the middle of what you're saying all the time, that can often lead to fatigue as well in a student, because as you go through those pauses, they're going with you. So things like editing software kind of help cut that, but the technique of trying to not make that information fly by too fast is also just part of that balance. So it takes time to learn. But those are just a few of the examples. Yeah, okay. And the last one here is interactive learning. So with multimedia, the goal is to find interactive ways for the students to elaborate on what they learned and ultimately apply it to their life and career. So those of you who have Canvas courses that are teaching students, if you come to TLS, we're trying to get professors to do this all the time, to create engaging material so that there is that relationship, even through the internet, between the student and the professor. There's many, many ways to do that, whether it be through the LMS system or just how you portray yourself on a camera, all those kind of things. All that comes into play. So the simulation of educational videos can keep the content from seeming passive to the student, depending on how you're depicting it to them. So right now, as of 2024, the average attention span is about 8.25 seconds. And just to put that in context, a goldfish has the attention span of 9 seconds. So, this isn't to say that people can't pay attention for longer periods of time, but catering to that statistic can help depending on who your audience is and what kind of grade they're looking for, maybe. Obviously, we won't be making educational content as short as 9 seconds. That's probably impossible in our environment, but finding ways that students can interact within your videos or how videos can relate to the homework can often be access points of stimulation to keep the student engaged with what you're doing. And then the mission with multimedia is to get students to think creatively and critically about the work that they're studying. That's what every professor wants to see out of their students. And as we all know, it's a tough fight, but wanting them to see the relevance of what they're learning is of the most importance. And I wouldn't necessarily say multimedia is the future. It's been around for a while, but it does make an aspect of learning much more accessible and interactive. And it is something worth diving into if there are professors here who haven't quite made that jump quite yet. It can really turn into a collaborative experience and a lot more student engagement and them wanting to talk as well and learn more. So even having students make videos as part of their coursework can give them opportunities to get creative about their work and ultimately explain their coursework in their own words. So an example of that could be like, oh, well, give me a video summary in your own oratory words on why, who was Napoleon, that kind of thing. It could be anything. Okay, so what video practices should you use? When it comes to faculty creating content for students, you won't always have access to a large amount of professional resources just in your immediate surroundings. So if you solicit TLS's services, you have access to things like professional video recordings through me or audio editing, our Lightboard room, which is what I'm using right now, having Canvas integration, graphic design assistance, motion graphics, all that stuff. But sometimes, faculty, they get put in a pinch, as often happens, and sometimes the TLS schedule can't really meet the last minute request that a faculty member has if they're trying to add something a little bit late in the game, which is totally fine. It happens. But sometimes TLS is so backed up themselves that, they have a hard time making that request on time. So even in a pinch, my goal is to help show you how you can enact some best practices that'll help elevate the look and feel of any kind of videos or multimedia you have coming in. So we'll focus specifically on video for this time because that seems to be the easiest thing to do. So I have an acronym here. It's called CLASS. And what this breaks down to is camera settings, lighting, a quiet, clean space, a script, and then staying calm. So we'll talk through all those points real quick. The first one I want to talk about is camera settings. So let's talk about it. All right. So what you first need to establish is what kind of video am I trying to make for my students? So this question impacts the different settings you would use to accomplish your video. For example, questions to ask yourself could be, is my video primarily me talking over a PowerPoint? If yes, let's say we're using Camtasia for this, you would need to turn on your screen recorder, your audio, and potentially your webcam to display in the corner of your video as well, just to have a little bit more interaction and sure that there's a human face behind all of that. If you use any external equipment like a microphone, let's say, you would need to set that up through system audio and switch that over to your input setting. which should be fairly simple. It's that last setting right there on the right. And then also, as a side note, if you have an external microphone, use it. 10 out of 10 times, use it. It'll always sound better than what's coming out of your computer, which often just sounds like you're talking through a tin can when you're just using computer audio. So let's give another practical example. So most people have iPhones or something like an iPhone, just some kind of smartphone. These cameras can be a really, really great asset when you need a quick production for quick content to throw up onto your Canvas course or whatever. Changing small features can really, really elevate your video. And not everybody knows about this, but like you can see here on this iPhone picture, you can turn your HD resolution to 4K resolution. That'll really crisp things up. Recording your video in landscape mode, so long ways instead of portrait mode, because that'll change the aspect ratio, and it always looks better when it's in landscape mode. Not overdoing your frame rate, and that would be the number that's on the top left corner there. You'll see in the first picture it says 60, and then the second it says 30. When you do 60, it tends to look a little I don't know how to describe this very well, but it almost looks too real, if that makes sense. Like the motion you're seeing from me right now, this would be at 30 frames a second. If we did 60, there wouldn't be as much blur between me waving my arm. And while that seems like more realistic, at the same time, people aren't necessarily expecting that when they see a video. So it can be kind of jarring to have it at 60 frames a second. These are all small ways that you can keep your videos looking great, up to par with media standards for just, the everyday person that can use video equipment, whether that be your iPhone or your computer, all that kind of stuff. It can be really simple if you just elevate a few of the settings. The next thing I want to talk about is lighting a video. This one is a little more complicated, but I'm going to quickly go through some techniques here. I'm not expecting anyone to come up with this lighting rig. Usually if you solicit my services here at TLS, you may see a rig that is closer to this, but this is called a 3-point lighting system. And as you can see, we have lights coming from a few different directions on this picture here. We have the key light, the backlight, and the fill light. You can see their position from the camera. The fill light is on the right, key light is on the left, and then the backlight obviously is coming from behind. And you can also see the amount of coverage their luminance is covering on the figure in the middle of the picture, the person over there. These lights can serve multiple purposes, but the main point of a system like this is to create dimension that separates the subject from the background. So for instance, if I had a light behind me right now, which I don't, I just have this lightboard rig system, which has lights on the front of it. If I had a light behind me, suddenly you would see an outline on the back of my person. And what that would do is that would distinguish me a lot more from the black wall that's behind me right here. That is a way to kind of create 3D without actually having 3D. It's like when you learn shadows and drawing or painting or anything like that. Just creates dimension. So yeah, I talked a little bit about this, but obviously your key light, and you'll see that here, the key light is turned all the way up to 100. So that's your main light. And usually that's going to be somewhere on the left or the right that's in front of you. But that is going to be the primary light that is coming onto your figure. And then that backlight, we just talked about that. That's going to help outline some of the figure that you have. And then the fill light is supposed to lightly color in what the key light is not doing. Now the fill light is going to be at a lower luminance because, like, for instance, when you're outside, the sun is only coming from one direction. So you're not going to have full, if the sun is over to my right, and it's showing light on this side of my face, this side of my face is going to have a little bit more shadow to it. That would be more realistic than both sides, the key light and the fill light, at 100%, and I'm just fully lit, and I just look like a flat surface on a screen. So that's usually how that works. But now that we have the theory, not everyone has access to this kind of lighting system. Again, if that's something you're looking for, something more professional like that, please reach out to me. I'll leave my email at the end of this, or just send me a Teams message. But not everyone has access to that in their immediate surroundings. So what are some more practical ways that you can integrate lighting into your videos? So let's talk about that. So the first suggestion I have is that ring lights are relatively cheap, and they're often accessible with iPhones. You'll see from that picture there that usually the iPhone goes in the center of the ring light, and it just provides, kind of like the way that this light board does, it just provides a forward-facing light that goes onto your figure. And those usually can range anywhere from like $20 to $50 on Amazon. They're pretty easy to get. And they're fairly sustainable as an option as well if you need to get a quick video done, and I think it just looks a lot better. Let's see. If you don't have a ring light, or you don't want a ring light, even having a lamp or two that functions as a key light and fill light could work as well, especially if it's close to the person. You will notice that I'm not suggesting that you turn on your overhead lights that are in all the USF buildings, these LEDs. They tend to not flatter a person's face when it comes to lighting. Usually, it kind of shows the rivets, and there's lots of shadows that come down as well. It can often make people like me look a little more sickly than they normally would be. So usually I suggest that those lights don't be used. Some other options could be, if you want to strike a balance in DIY that gives more natural coverage, you could do things like get yourself in front of a window, so that when the window is shining on your face, that provides a good sense of coverage with key light as well. Not saying it has to be perfect or anything like that, just enough light to feel natural, if that makes sense. What else here? If you're doing a webcam recording, something that I've always done is you can Google like a white image on Google and download it. And then what I do is typically I'll start the recording, and then sometimes even a Word document works for this. So if you have things you want to say and they're typed out, after you've hit record, blow up the Word document to the full screen and then turn your brightness all the way up. And the reason I say that is because in an environment where that is acting as your main key light, the white of the document will shine onto your person. I would say that probably like don't put yourself in a dark room and that's the only light you have on. I wouldn't necessarily say that either, but that could work as your main light. And it shines very brightly. Computers can get pretty bright nowadays, but that's just another example. If it works out, great. But if it doesn't look that great, you don't have to use it either. This is all up to you and what looks best for your figure. The only light I would avoid probably is actually going into the outdoors to have as a light source. If you're actually outside, a lot of times it does look a little bit harsher because the sun is directly on you, but it's coming usually from a high spot in the sky, and then oftentimes clouds are going by, so that changes the brightness, and sometimes the camera tries to overcompensate for that, and it just winds up looking like a haywire mess. I would say that mirrors typically are not a good option, as well. If you're trying to like reflect light from somewhere and bounce it onto you, in my experience, it just typically does not look the same or even. And then like we were talking about, try not to use overhead lights either, because you may just wind up looking like you're in a Godfather movie or something like that. So the next one is a quiet, clean space. So it can be hard to find a quiet, clean space to record your videos. But you're going to want that so you're not interrupted. You have a pleasant environment to clear your head in, and also it looks presentable for a video as well. So I have a confession. I have so much equipment that I work with on a daily basis that my office is just not a very clean environment. Stuff is just everywhere. I'm constantly pulling stuff out and using it. So I usually have other rooms, or I try and set up smaller environments that have the appearance of looking clean, because all that really matters is what's actually in the frame. Uh, but most faculty here, they have doors that can close, and that can help isolate audio as well from flying right out the door, and it just sounds a lot more hollow than it might normally would. So I would suggest, yeah, like when you're ready to record, just go ahead and close that door. Put a sign on the door that says that you're recording, and that's just so nobody barges in and nobody likes starting over on a recording either. And then also, instead of having like a blank wall as your background, if you have of I would say that you could find ways to put fun and interesting items and trinkets and colors in the background, potentially, whatever you find in your office that can help students have something to look at as they're listening to you and the information that you're relaying to them as well. So yeah, I would just say like be intentional with that, and I tend to find that students, it's usually a subconscious thing for them, but they do appreciate it, and it's one less distraction for them ultimately, because it's more distracting if you have an extremely messy background or some kind of, I don't know, something that looks bad, let's say, that could be more distracting than having nice things in the background that they can still look at, but it's not an overwhelming distraction for them. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is your script. So I know some teachers do well when they can fly off the cuff, but when it comes to keeping a video concise, my best advice to our faculty here is to just simply have a script on hand, just to keep yourself on track. Videos tend to get kind of messy quickly if we go off the cuff, unless you have an absolutely clear idea of what you want to say from front to back, and at least for like an introduction or something like that, if it's going to be like 5 minutes or less, maybe 10 minutes or less, I would say that typically just have a script just in case you need it. It's not to say you have to look at it all the time and make it sound like you're reading out loud or anything like that, but it's just something to reference. And I've done that with plenty of people here as well. So another thing about that, when you have short prose, this can help keep the content digestible for the students, helping them tap into the audio aspect of the cognitive load and not let that overwhelm the visuals either. You want to find a way to kind of strike that balance, and that's something that if you collaborate with me, I would be able to help you with. I have lots of experience in this realm, but it can be kind of hard getting to that point where you know what that balance is in the moment. So the last thing I want to say is just to stay calm. So when the red light starts blinking and you start recording, no one's really the exception here, I suppose, but nearly everybody gets anxiety as soon as that happens. And, people start talking fast, and they start going through little tics that normally wouldn't be the case, that kind of stuff. And these are people that teach in front of a classroom all the time, but for some reason, when the red light is on, all of a sudden they're kind of jamming up, and it's just because it's a different experience. It's not like being in a classroom a lot of times, but there are ways that we can kind of replicate the experience that keeps you true to who you are, while also giving a more concise amount of information than you would in a classroom, let's say. Just remember that like the stakes are lower than even if you were in a classroom, because we can always edit stuff out. We can always restart the sentence. We can do all that stuff. So there's really no reason to be nervous at all when you're recording a video. So a common misconception is that you have to start an entire video over when you mess up on like the last sentence of your script, let's say. And this actually isn't true. A simple way to combat that is to cut the video from the beginning of the sentence that you messed up on, and then restarting the sentence from the beginning. And then in the editing process, we would just cut to that better take, instead of having to start the whole video over again until you have one flowing video the entire time. That's probably just not a reality, and it tends to actually waste a lot of time, especially for people that aren't as experienced with being in front of a camera themselves, which is totally okay. Editing is just, it's so forgiving. If you have questions on that, I would be happy to answer them. I'm happy to help you anytime you have a video like that. Those are easy fixes for me. So sometimes I can get them done even within a half an hour of you sending them in. I'm not making any promises, but typically, you know, those are smaller ticket items for me. Let's see. And then also, just as a tip, just remember to move at the speed of conversation like you would in a classroom. A lot of times, you know, taking a script a portion at a time, not trying to tackle the whole thing and, you know, have no pauses in your sentences whatsoever. Because like I said, we can just edit those out so that it's not an overload for the cognitive mind, but it has a consistent beat to it, a certain flow that works for the students really well. I would recommend also that initially go ahead and view yourself in a webcam if you're going to use that for recording. You know, just make sure all the hairs are in the right place, all that kind of stuff. But then after you start recording, go ahead and minimize that window so that you don't have to look at yourself talking the whole time, if that makes sense. It can often be a distraction for the person giving a talk as well. And actually, I'm actually breaking that rule right now because I can see myself in this monitor. So, you know, I gotta practice what I preach here. Also, you know, just remember, give yourself some water. I got mine right here so that you don't dry up, and be sure you give yourself a practice run as well. You know, it's not like when we were recording on film, you know, it's not expensive to do a retake of a digital recording. So give yourself some grace in that aspect. And then ultimately just do whatever makes you feel like yourself when you're in that environment. You know, the more you teach with multimedia and working with that production process, the easier it becomes. It really is just one of those things where practice kind of makes perfect. And, you know, newscasters don't start out doing an amazing job either. You know, it takes time to kind of build that skill and to figure out how it works in that medium, just like it would in the classroom or anywhere else. So, okay, does anybody have any questions about anything that was discussed today? I'd be happy to answer some questions while we're still on the call. Anybody? Yeah, Teresa?
Thanks, John. I did have a couple of questions, just more specific to Canvas Studio.
Sure.
And so you mentioned using PowerPoints or using other kinds of visuals. Is there a particular, and I'm not familiar with Canvas Studio at all, I've not used it, but does that give you the opportunity to display something else on your screen as you're talking over it? Or would you need another product like Camtasia or Screencast-O-Matic or something to do that for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so you would be able to do a screen recording on Studio.
Great.
So that way, when you record the video, you'll have the audio, you'll have the screen recording, and then it'll upload it right to your Studio for you so that you could put it in
Oh,
any course or anything else that you'd like. And
nice.
if you need it edited, it also gives me or Will or anybody else the option to go into your Canvas Studio and
Hmm.
download the video. We can edit it up, and then we can put it right back on
Oh,
your
okay.
studio for you. So
Okay.
yeah.
So does it have in studio editing? Like I feel very comfortable with video editing my own, but does it give you that option?
That is a good question. I actually
Okay.
have never done it, so I don't know. Will, do
Okay.
you know if it does?
Yeah, yeah. So it does.
Great.
Now,
Great.
the one thing to know is to kind of give yourself enough time, because if you want to
Mhm.
use the full featured editing, I mean, full featured as much as Canvas has, but you can add
Mhm.
like some title slide, or those types of things. You have to
Mhm.
do it right after you record your video.
Oh, okay.
Um, if you just need some like trimming and cutting,
Uh,
you can do that after the fact. So you could do your
okay.
video, save it to your studio.
Uh,
You would have the option to go in and edit using um, Canvas Studio, but it
okay.
only, after you upload, it only allows you to do a trim and a cut. It doesn't add any of the other features in.
Oh, wow. Okay. So everything else has to be done essentially before you publish the video.
Correct. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Right
Okay.
after you record it, there's a little bit more. It's got a few more tools. It's
Okay.
pretty robust. I mean, it's not Camtasia or Premiere, but it does okay.
Great. And my final question, do we have licenses for Camtasia?
So I know that we used to. I don't know if that's still the case for everybody. Are there other people in here that have Camtasia currently as a license?
I and Natalie might know this better. I don't think that we have, and if we did, it would be kind of individual licenses here and there. Now, at one time, and the computers, the library had some licenses, and the computers that you could borrow from the library had, some of them had Camtasia on it,
Okay.
but I don't know that for a fact. So I might be lying to you, and I apologize.
Well, and David Stilick said he thinks that there can still be Snagit licenses. He says he has one with the university. Um, but Camtasia is now a personal license. Um, and apparently they have EDU deals. So yeah, that may be something to look into if that's something you're wanting to get into, Teresa. Yeah, right. Anybody else have any questions?
I would just add, John. John's done some pretty cool editing. Also, Teresa, you might be familiar with it, but Adobe has Premiere Pro, their kind of full suite. But then they also have Premiere Rush, that's a little bit more mobile friendly, but it has quite a bit of editing capabilities there as well. So those are two options that you do have access to through your sf.edu email through the Creative Cloud.
Yeah, that's a great option. It's a little more intuitive than Premiere is. Rush is a little more intuitive than Premiere would be. But yeah, okay. All right. Well, I won't hold anyone up any longer, but if you have any questions, just go ahead and reach out to my email and be happy to talk about this stuff more. I talk about it all the time with faculty. So, yeah, if you have any projects, let me know and we'll get something started. Okay. Thank you, everybody.